actually I'm here because of my brother. I'm a twin brother. Back in '96, took a Jonah course with Alex Ferman. And when he told me about the course, I said, okay, interesting. You were there too?
As a student.
Okay. So, yes, and then he just mentioned the fact that it's a great idea there also to manage projects using this new idea of TOC. I couldn't figure it out. I heard some things of the Jonah course. It didn't somehow match how this is going to be matched together. So I said, okay, let's try and hear more about it. And so I had a course by Alex on project management. And I was exactly then changing the position at Elbit from managing business to actually being in charge of process improvement and quality. So I said, yeah, well, Elbit, a company that makes its living by projects in the area of defense electronics, it really behooves the company, as Eli would say, to do better in this area. And so I managed to convince Elbit's management to have a pilot of 2 projects with Alex Klarman actually leading it. And at the beginning of '97, for about 6 months, we actually had the training and everything. And guess what? It worked for the 2 projects. And then I went to management, and as part of management, we were discussing it, and everybody said, well, it's not a chochmeh, you know, you have 2 projects. All the company is actually focusing on them. The real problem is, how do you really manage resources contention with other projects, okay? So what is the real thing behind it? Now we're talking about '97. Critical Chain is not out yet as a book, okay? So a lot of questions, and I said, no, I must hear Eli myself. So after some time, until Eli was kind enough to spend some of his time, and so some evening we met at the end of the day, and he explained, I had my questions, got the message, and then I clearly remember that we had a meeting with Elbit's president. I don't recall exactly what was there. The reason I recall the meeting is that on the way back, I drove Eli, and we came to the entrance of Pasaba, and he gives me direction to his home, and we lose our way. Okay, so that's something that I clearly remembered. And the decision was, after meeting the president of Elbit, to have a workshop of 5 days. Now this is one thing that I wanted to share with you, this 5 days workshop with Elbit's management. Now, I had my chance of at least one evening telling Eli that this is a company of about $400 million of sales, 20 to 100 people, metrics organization, business divisions, 2 engineering and divisions, and now not much more to tell because we didn't have much time. So I said it's a good idea before we lose him that I'll drive him every day in the morning, okay, taking from home and getting him back. I'll get some more time. We'll be able to discuss somehow and make sure that he gets there. So Ishai was with us, and the morning session, it's about 1 hour drive, okay, from his home to Haifa, where Elbit's headquarters were at that time. And we actually drive half of the way, telling jokes, all kinds of stories. It's about 20 minutes before we arrive that Eli asked for, okay, silence, please. And he's just thinking, okay? And when we arrive, every morning, he summarizes the day before with insights that leaves all the 16 people representing Elbit's management with just Joe's down, because actually he was capable of bringing in such insights, although he was 1 against 15, I would say, non-believers, some of them with some good IQ, some of them with less, but still, nevertheless, he was able to handle those guys. Now, what I did not know was actually that by having those meetings in the morning time, were actually depriving Eli from his sleeping hours. So what really happened was, we're having this one day, second day. By Wednesday, we have a person who did not sleep, actually, for all this time, because we actually were working on his nighttime, actually, and sleeping hours. So I remember Wednesday, he was already quite tired, and you could see it on him. And it's then that it starts an argument about really what happens with multitasking in the company. And it was not resolved until we actually had to bring in 2 team leaders to actually testify to management what is really happening in the company, okay? And so that's just to give you the capability of a one man actually telling people who really knew their business how to actually persuade them that they have to move and change. So this was the opening. The second experience I'd like to share following this workshop that ended up with a decision to implement critical change at Albert was the implementation itself. So, well, you know, I mean, I had my hours with Eli, but it wasn't really many hours at the end of the day. And so we start a full implementation with first it was 400 people gathered in a big conference hall that was out of Albert, and President of Albert gives his speech, and then Eli explains the whole theory, and ends up with a small vision of saying, Albert, you're now 400 million, you're going to be within 4 years 4 billion. Okay, now I still have guys who actually reminded to me, okay, that because Albert still 20 years later is not there. Okay, I have a good excuse for Eli. Okay, Eli is just 3.3 billion. Eli actually expected to have the strategic session he had in mind in Amsterdam with Albert's president, but then Albert embarked on a merger with another company called TOCPA. It became time-consuming for the president. He kind of was not feeling very comfortable of actually telling them also to embark on TOC, and so it kind of dissolved. Albert was keeping this way of managing, but it was less effective than the 2 first years after we made this implementation. So by these 2 things, I want to tell you that the implementation after this 400 people gathered was supposed to be training and start working. But Eli also said, okay, we just need a small software to help us with it. And it's not existing, okay, but we'll bring in throughput, Sanjeev, and he will do a 10 days work, max, to change it from a DBR software to a critical change software. And don't worry, I mean, it's going to work, okay? So by November, we got the first version, and I actually fully understood that if I'm not going to develop, luckily I had the IT department under my responsibility, the whole intrabit part. Okay, we would end up with just one software piece running on one central computer that would have reports provided by printouts. Okay, so it was this interesting approach, which I kindly like to call this way of experimenting, that Eli was capable of actually defining a new method and solving the details on the run as we go. Actually not letting the details keep him from next experiment, next deduction of what is important. And as we go, we learn from our mistakes. And if there is a real challenge, we have a new theory of a different issue that is being resolved again as we go. So I think I owe a lot to Eli, and just to mention the fact that first, it's really a great, if you want, honor, pleasure to be challenged with a theory that has a whole vision of how to manage both a corporation and also personal life. I spent some time at Harvard. Even those guys provide you with bits and pieces of tools, but they don't dare to suggest that they have a comprehensive way of management. And I'm also missing and cherishing those hours, mainly late at night, where I would sit with Eli, read to him those books, the drafts he was writing, and wanted to hear if I get it right, the debates, the jokes, the fact that he taught me some good tricks in casinos that we went together, and mainly the fact that every meeting that I had with him, I always ended up feeling much better when I left than when I entered. So he had this ability to influence, to bring in some positive thinking, much better when you leave than when you enter. Thank you.